Welcome to the Better Two podcast. I'm your host, Donna. Today's guest is Lawrence C. Conley, and we discuss his book, Minutemen Execute and Run. We also discuss his music career, as well as the possibility of the actual book being turned into a movie. So tune in. Hi, Lawrence. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you. It's great to be here.
It's good to be. I'm glad you're here. You have a very interesting background because I know you have a book coming out, and that's the first thing I want to talk to you about is the Minutemen Execute and Run. But there's a lot of things when I was doing my research on you that you have a very diverse career. And I've talked to a couple of people like that. Mr. Richard Sparks is another gentleman who's an author who has a very diverse career. So I want to explore all of those things. But let's talk about your book that's coming out.
Yeah, the new book, has a really interesting story. It's interesting where things begin and how they roll out. And this began probably back in 2018. My brother, Christopher, is a graphic artist and an entrepreneur, and he had this idea. And I heard about it from my brothers first. They were saying, Chris has this cool idea. You should talk to him about it. And finally, in 2018, it was July, and I was doing a panel at the Confluence Science Fiction Convention. That's in Pittsburgh. And he dropped by. I had just finished a panel on the monetization of science. And so my head was all full of entrepreneurs and biotech startups and things like that. And we left the con. We went up the street to a bistro. We sat down. He had this big folder full of stuff. He's an artist. So, I think I write, and he thinks he draws. And so he had all these pictures of these characters. And he gave me the basic pitch, which is that we have this team of wounded warriors. They're given a second chance by a biotech firm that's funded by a mysterious venture capitalist. And we go from there. So in that afternoon, we hashed everything out. We kind of hit all the beats, and our first plan was to do a spec screenplay. So I went to work on the screenplay. I finished it just in time to take it along when the film Nightmare Cinema opened in LA. That's a film that I worked on with Mick Garris and David Slade and some other people. And Chris went out with me and we pitched. So between screenings, we were pitching this concept. And we had a couple of very successful pitches, no commitments. There was one more meeting that we had to take. I had to fly back. I'm based in Pittsburgh. I had to fly back home. He decides to stay a little bit longer and do this one last pitch session. I have a stopover in Salt Lake City. I get off the plane. I turn on my phone. He's got like a dozen messages for me there. I call him back and he says, I met with Jonathan Sanger and he's interested. And Jonathan Sanger is the Academy Award winning producer of such things as Vanilla Sky and The Elephant Man and most recently Cabrini, which was out last year. And Jonathan was interested, and so before too long, we had a deal. Everything's moving forward nicely, and then along comes the COVID virus, lockdown, things, production stops on everything. We begin to recover, and then we have the writer's strike, the actor's strike. We begin to recover, and we get these fires. And there's one fire. Chris now has an apartment on Orange, North Orange in West Hollywood. And it came to within just a couple blocks of his house. I have a picture of this. It's amazing. Or a couple blocks of his apartment. So we're getting delayed. And I'm thinking, there's a novel here. So I decided to write the novel on spec. And because we already had the beats already hammered out, it came together nicely. It's now placed with Arc Manor. They're going to be bringing it out October 14th. And I couldn't be more excited about it. And what we are thinking now is that the book, and initially I thought maybe this film would do well and I could get a novel out of it. But now it's looking as if the book is going to pull the novel or pull the movie
Hmm.
forward. So we'll see. But I couldn't be happier with this. And it's a gas working with my brother because we complement each other in so many ways. I mean, I'm a word man. He's a picture man. And as a result, we have all these pictures that he's drawn, he's created, and we've started a newsletter. You can find it at concomentertainment.substack.com. That's Concom, C-O-N as in Connolly, right? And in here, I'm able to put into the newsletter some of the really cool graphics he has generated that inspired the story. And we've had two newsletters come out so far. They're a lot of fun to put together. But that's what we're working on. And I just couldn't be happier working with my brother, working with Jonathan, and having this thing come to fruition. So the next year is going to be really exciting.
Oh, I can imagine. And I mean, you have kind of a leg up because he is a graphic artist. You had the potential when you did your pitches to already have some of this stuff storyboarded out.
That's right. I think that really gave us a leg up. That plus the concept, but the pictures sure certainly helped people see the book, and it helped me see it too as I was working on it. I don't collaborate. I rarely collaborate. As a matter of fact, one thing that my brother and I pretty much agreed on after that meeting that we had at that bistro was that okay, we've got it. These are the beats, let me work. And so I go home, work alone, and don't show him anything. I'm not one of those guys that likes to workshop a lot. I like to work on my own, get everything right. I want everything to be right there when I show it to somebody for the first time. I don't want to be in a situation where I'm showing people the increments because I want to wow them with all of the changes and the beats and the way things twist around. And so I wanted to be just right. But as it turns out, since it went from screenplay to novel, when he got the novel, he already knew the base where I was taking the basic story. But the novel was able to do things that the screenplay didn't do. I just had a really good conversation, well, email conversation with Kat Rambo, and Kat was talking about how in novels versus screenplays, we're able to go inside the characters, and I think that that's what I was able to do in this novel was get inside the characters' heads in a way that we weren't able to get inside them in the screenplay. And yet, in the novel, we have very strong visuals that are inspired by Chris's work. So I think we have the best of both worlds in this book.
Well, and the fact that you kind of already have the screenplay done, this is one thing that benefits you. Because when you look at a book like The Firm, you remember The Firm. Everybody
The
loved the
Firm,
book.
yes.
Everybody loved the book The Firm. And then the movie came out. And the movie felt so detached from the book. People complained about it. And the book was awesome, but the movie lacked something. And I think if you're working kind of backwards where you had your screenplay and then you went and created the book, you're going to have some of the same elements. It's not going to meander off so much. Granted, it may not be able to let you see inside the character's head it's as much with the movie, but there's a different nuance where The Firm just was completely not the same movie or book.
Yeah, I didn't read the book. I remember seeing the movie and liking it, but I did not get the book. Have you read the book?
Yes, yes. I read
Okay.
the book first. I thought the book was excellent. And then I watched the movie and I was kind of like, it wasn't the same.
All right.
It wasn't bad, but it
Uh-huh.
just wasn't the same. So that
And maybe that's a good thing. That so it changed, it adapted. I recall it was a pretty good movie.
mhm.
But I can't. I just
Yeah.
remember liking it. I don't really remember what it was about.
No, I
But
just go
but
ahead.
things change as we work on them. We evolve, and the work evolves. And I don't know. It was John Grisham
Yes,
who wrote the firm. John
John
Grisham,
Grisham.
and I believe he is fairly active in the films that are adapted from his work. I've always been fortunate that I've been involved in films that have been adapted from my work, and that's always been fun. I really enjoy. Uh, I said a moment ago that I don't like collaborating, but once I've finished something, once something is written, then I'm all for it. There was an episode. This is I found this very illuminating when I did the screenplay with David Slade for Nightmare Cinema, and we were working on an excerpt of Nightmare Cinema. This is the film by Mick Garris that is, you can now get it on Amazon, and it's an anthology. It's kind of like Tales of the Crypt,
Hmm.
but with Mickey Rourke as the Crypt Keeper. It's great stuff, and our segment was This Way to Egress, and it's based on my story Traumatic Descent, and it's a very literal adaptation. It's very much beat by beat, word for word, the story, even so much that the dialogue is right out of the story. And there was this one scene where the main character is standing outside a door of frosted glass, and on the other side of the door there are three silhouettes, one very large and two small. And the two small ones, she's pretty sure, are her kids. She's been looking for them. And the tall one, she knows for a fact, is her doctor. And the doctor seems to be turning the kids against her. And she can't go in. She's paralyzed. She stands outside the door and she listens to this conversation. And as she listens to the conversation, she begins to realize what is really going on in her life. And it goes on for, I don't know, maybe 3 pages. 3 pages of just one character standing in a hallway listening to people talk. And so I said to David Slade before they were about to film this, and I saw that it was set in the dailies to be filmed the next day. I said, would you like me to just go and have some action to this or do something? And he said, no, trust the process. So the next day, we have this incredible actor playing Helen, who's standing in the hall. And we have three incredible actors behind the frosted glass. And we have an amazing cinematographer, Yo Williams. And we have great lighting, and we're going to have great special effects because those are going to be added later. And everything is right there. We're going to have a great score. And when all of this comes together, it gives new life to what is written in the screenplay, what is written on the page. And I realized there that with filmmaking, as opposed to novel writing, um, collaboration is something I really dig it. I mean, it is the best thing going. The way that those 3 pages were transformed on the screen by a whole army of artists really goes to show what filmmaking is all about. And it also proves to me why AI is not going to take over that process anytime soon.
True. I mean, sure, you can make deep fakes with AI, but AI should not be used in the creative field. You want it to work in the science field, sure, but in the creative field, what you're doing is hurting other people. You can never get that human aspect of the creativity process.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to hear stories about people by people as much as possible. Now, that's not to say that we can't have a really gifted artist use AI as a tool. I think that that is something very, I really look forward to seeing that happen. But a case where a producer pushes a button and gets a movie, I don't think that's going to work. And I hope that's not going to work.
Well, even okay, so we can go back to this too. We've seen over the past few years that we've inserted people that have passed on. And I mean, that's gone on for a long time. The Crow, the movie The Crow, we ended up using a double to finish off the movie, the original Crow, when Brandon Lee died. But we've inserted other people that have died, and we've talked about, continuing to add, like, oh, we could bring Marilyn Monroe back. Do we want to do that? Because it's not really Marilyn. It's not going to be, I've seen an AI do this, and it's like, it's not really her. It's nuanced, but it's not really her. And I don't know that it ever will be.
That's right. Well, we'll see. I feel like, do you ever feel like we're living in a science fiction novel? It really feels that
Yes.
way sometimes. And you know, I started out with the science fiction magazines, writing stories on a manual typewriter and sending them off in the mail and waiting, 2, 3 months, getting a written rejection back from the editor, maybe getting a paper contract back from the editor, and maybe 6 months later, a year later, the story comes out in a magazine. And we are so far beyond that right now.
Mhm.
And it's been interesting and it's been exciting to watch how things have changed. I do miss those old days, but there's an exciting immediacy about working today. What we're doing right now,
Well,
Zoom. I'm based in Pittsburgh, as I said,
mhm.
and I can conduct business in LA and New York without leaving my home. And if I need to leave my home, I'm just a few miles from the airport, and I can be at the meeting in person if need be within a few hours. So I have this option that back in the day was something that only existed on this Hanna-Barbera cartoon show called The Jetsons. If you ever saw those on
Oh, yeah.
reruns, where the telephone, video phone, but now we're able to do this, conduct business without leaving the home. It's pretty amazing.
When Space Mountain first opened up at Disney World, and I know that, well, how does this pertain? You would ride the ride, and at the very end, as you were leaving, they would have this home of the future, and it was brought to you by RCA. And they, I think I was maybe 5 or 6 years old. So there was this computer screen where you would have somebody doing exactly what we're doing now. And there were all these bits of information. And even when you look at Star Trek, the technology that they had in their hand to be able to take a person's blood pressure and everything, that's kind of come to reality. But as great as all this is, what happens at the drop of a hat if all of this goes bye-bye?
That's right. Yeah. And I'm glad I know how to write.
Exactly. I mean, you know, some of us could survive because we've been surviving that way. It's not an issue. But there's other people that do not know what to do if they don't have tech.
That's it.
And
Yeah,
that,
we I heard something on one of your podcasts where uh see if this rings a bell, where a writer is talking about seeing a couple of kids or a bunch of kids riding by on their bikes, and they're calling to each other and they're saying, let's go see if somebody's home.
mhm,
Now, what they don't say is, let's call them on our cell phone.
no,
And the kids have cell phones, but they don't want to do that. They want to go in person, in the flesh, to see if that kid is home because they understand the meaning of interpersonal, face to face, flesh to flesh contact, right? And the upshot of this story, if I'm remembering it, I hope this is one of your podcasts. I'm pretty sure it is. And I think it was the one with Cat Rambo,
okay.
actually. And the upshot is that this new generation, the rising generation, is able to take technology so for granted as part of the background that they're able to step away from it, much as we are able to step away from anything that is commonplace in our lives and go do something we find more meaningful. We're not required to use it. And some people might feel as if they are required to use it. It's there, it's a tool, it's expected of them, they have to use it. But here's this new generation coming up that at least this one group of kids riding their bikes. And of course, riding the bike is an
Right.
interesting thing too, because nowadays you can go on YouTube and watch people ride bikes. You don't have to ride bikes. And but being able to mix it up in the real world is certainly a skill that we can't let go of. And that's why I also like going to conventions and meeting people, talking to people face to face. Going to be doing a convention coming up. That same convention where my brother and I met to talk about the Minutemen for the first time in 2018. I'm going to be going back to Confluence at the end of July And I'm really looking forward to that. We're going to have a little, not a little, but a big Minutemen execute and run display there. And looking forward to meeting a lot of people and talking about execute and run.
Nice. I want to go back though to what you were saying before about kids. I had a friend who was a teacher back in 2005, and she was talking about how she had to force the kids, and they were middle school, to put down the cell phones and actually get them to communicate with each other because they did not want to talk to each other unless it was on the cell phone. They did not want to interact. It was like if she told them, okay, you guys are being broken down to groups and you have to talk to each other, they didn't know what to do. And I'm glad that we are kind of that the younger generation is kind of going, yeah, I don't need all this. And that's a good thing because you need to be a little, dare I say, feral to be allowed yourself to experience life, to be able to, you know, talk to your friends and communicate. Most of my friends rarely do we text because I'd rather have a conversation than to sit there and text because 9 times out of 10, you can get that conversation taken care of quicker than sending back and forth text. Because one text turns into another text turns into another text, and you spent a half hour texting when it could have been a 10-minute conversation.
That's right. And you miss so much. You miss
Hmm.
so much to the facial expressions and the body language.
Hmm.
And just the ability to interrupt, which is a nice ability for clarification. Back up. What did you mean? And so as a result, I think that the face-to-face stuff for me, as well as you, is much richer, and I do like it a lot more. Although I do appreciate this as well. When you're writing, sometimes people have trouble with characters who are potentially always in touch with one another. And there are things in the story that you don't want people to know, but they can know it. They can Google it, they can call somebody up. And so we get this thing where people are always saying, there's no signal. Oh, my battery's down. He doesn't pick up all of these things that need to be done in stories today to make sure that we don't give away something that some of the characters are supposed to know and others are supposed to not know. But what I've been doing is I've actually found it is a lot of fun to work through that. I'm consciously trying not to write stories where characters have no cell phone service, but where if a character wants to pick up the phone and reach the mysterious person who's been heckling them, then the character can do that. And that adds a whole new dimension to the story. I find that the story can move along a lot faster, and I can find more inventive ways of keeping the truth from the main character if I just go ahead and let those characters have their cell phones. And some of those characters are going to choose not to use them, just like those kids on the bike. But many of them will choose to use them and will get the answers that they think they want, only to discover that the answer that they got is not the answer they needed. Because after all, whether you're talking to a person face to face or on a cell phone, they can withhold information or they can give you false information. So I'm trying to work that into stories as much as possible.
See me, I'm doing the exact opposite. My books start out in the 1980s. So I have travel blogs because not everything is on the internet. So I have travel books that have locations and places from the 80s and even something as simple as a pregnancy test. It's not the same. I mean, it was a chemical test back then. You had to mix chemicals. Not until like the late 80s did you actually have the pregnancy test similar to what we have now. So
Yeah.
you have to go back and you have to. So I'm taking us back to a time where, yes, it's simpler, but there's also more things to navigate and negotiate.
Yeah. It's amazing that so few science fiction writers saw this coming, saw the internet coming, saw the cell phone coming. A few did, but one of the most notable ones that doesn't include it, I think, is William Gibson's. Is it Johnny Mnemonic? I think it is, where people are uploading things in phone booths and they do not have cell phones and they can't upload with cell phones. But one writer who got it right, very close to right, and he got it right in the 50s, I believe, was Ray Bradbury. Now,
Hmm.
there's a story, trying to think of the title of it, but the story is about a character who has a communication device, and all of his friends, everybody else has a communication device, and they're able to stay in contact with each other 24/7. And so they do it. And it's, as I recall, the story is about this character realizing that he doesn't have to do that, that it's going to drive him mad if he continues to stay in contact with with all of his friends. Or maybe it's something else where his power goes out and he does go mad. I forget, but it's a Ray Bradbury story. I know that for sure. Sound familiar? Have you ever heard of that one?
Mm-mm.
It'll come to me 5 minutes
No,
after
I
we're done
know.
with this
I know.
podcast.
I know. Well, I mean, it's like, talking about science fiction, there was an episode of Sliders that's kind of come to light with cryptocurrency because they slid into this timeline and everything was basically done with credits. Everything was all credits. So you worked, you got credits. You never had anything tangible in your hand. It was all something that was, dare I say, a numbers game because there was nothing real about it. If you said something wrong, you could get lose credits. And I mean, that is to another extreme. But when you think about it, is crypto not that? Because you don't actually have anything to be tangible for your cryptocurrency. Sure, you have the coins in the system, but it's all computerized. So with a
Right.
blink of an eye, if somebody decided to hack it, even with unless you actually have cash now, even our banking systems like that. So when you look at the bigger picture, it's like, are we slowly going into more sci-fi stuff where we will have less and less control of things and things will be navigated for us?
Yeah, it's all fiction, isn't it? I mean, money is fiction.
Hmm.
It's a story that we make up.
Hmm.
It's a fantasy, and we believe in it.
Hmm.
The Mandela effect, and we believe this is true. We believe this money works, and thank goodness, if people decided to stop believing in money, um, that'd be scary.
Hmm. But when you think about it, though, we did a long time ago we did not solely focus on money. We focused on bartering. We focused on, hi, I can sew your pants if you give me a loaf of bread. And
That's
money was
right.
not part of the transaction, but we have become such a money-driven society that money is everything.
And there's a lot of things that we can acquire today that just don't exist in the physical world.
Hmm.
And not things even like prestige that we get on social media, the acclamation that we get. Those are non-physical, non-tangible, but they are transactional.
But here's the thing about that. So you get that one like, and yes, your dopamine hit goes up. But the person that gets 200 hits on one video, and then the next day, the algorithm says, "Oh, sorry, we're not going to play with you today. You're only going to get five." That messes with, I mean, I've heard stories of people that have friends that are younger that her daughter's friend had a bikini picture she posted and she got like 200,000 hits. And then the next day she posted something and she got 10. And her whole attitude and mood just tanked. And it's like, you have to you have to separate yourself from that. Otherwise, this algorithm, which is something once again that is not real, is messing with your head and playing psychological games. And does that prestige on the internet really matter? Because really now, and I had this conversation yesterday with somebody, when you look at fame back in the 80s and the 90s, we were still seeing the posters of James Dean and Elvis Presley and Marilyn Monroe at the poster shop, and they were still big icons. And they're still somewhat big icons, but it's not the same now. Taylor Swift, yes, she's a whole different story, but you don't have the celebrity icons that you used to have. Fame is more
Yes.
fleeting now.
I'm wondering if that's a phase or if that's something that's going to be here to stay. Um, are we just are we just waiting for the next big wave? I'm thinking of the time between Elvis and the Beatles, um, waiting for the next big thing.
I wouldn't, maybe, but I don't think so because here's the thing. Once again, back then we didn't have the technology. You were waiting for that contract in the mail. You're waiting for that next single to come out. You weren't get inundated constantly with how many other pieces of music coming out. You weren't inundated with how many books coming out. So it's a lot different now because now we have a society that has a news cycle that turns on a dime. Where before a news cycle would last a while. And so I think that has something to do with the fame game because now I can, and I have a friend who's a publicist And he's talked about the fact that fandom is not what it used to be because, yes, we have our fandoms, but it's not as mega crazy, except for like Taylor Swift, as it used to be because we don't have that anymore. We get the new song, we get the new single, we get the new book, and then we're like, where's the next one? And if you don't put it out right away, then you kind of start fading to the background unless you're keeping yourself relevant. And it's hard to keep yourself relevant if you're working on your next project.
That's right. And you do have to work on the next project. Oh, we're back.
We're back.
Okay. And that's something else that we didn't have to contend with before either. Making sure that I feel powered up, but my computer didn't feel powered up. Yeah, you're right. It takes a long time to write something good, and it takes a long time for something to generate and to percolate and to get it right. And I am a firm believer in taking as much time as it takes to get something right. And I was just thinking recently that I've spent all these years, started out writing for the science fiction magazines in 1980. And I got into it because at that time I was a musician and I was playing at nights and had a really good job playing 5 nights a week. And I would come home, we would finish up the show at 2 o'clock in the morning. And then we would have to go out to get breakfast, right? So,
Mhm.
all the people who were at the show, everybody goes along and has breakfast, get home around 5. And my wife then gets up at 6 to go to work at a bank. And then I have the morning to sleep, and then I get up around noon or so, go out to get together with my brother. This was a different brother. We were in the band together, and work on music, practice, get the sets ready, and then go out and play that next night. And this was going on and on. I would only see my wife peripherally as she was getting up and getting ready for work. And I began to think I'm missing an awful lot here. So I decided an artist can work from home
Mhm.
if he's willing to be a writer. So that's when I started thinking that maybe it was time to take that energy I was putting into music and try to write some stories. It didn't come out of the blue. I was really interested in science fiction, and I really felt like I had some stories to tell. So I started dabbling in them, and they started selling. So this is in the 1980s, the early 1980s, and I met with some good success early on. The sixth story I had ever written sold to Twilight Zone, Rod Serling's Twilight Zone magazine, and it was my second sale there. And shortly after it comes out, I get a letter from Martin Harry Greenberg, who's putting together an anthology with Terry Carr and Isaac Asimov, and they want to purchase the rewrites for the story.
Nice.
And shortly after that, I get a letter from Carl Edward Wagner, who wants to purchase the rewrite or the reprint rights to the story for Year's Best Horror. And then I get a letter from Budapest, Hungary, an agency, and they're offering me 4 figures for the reprint rights to this story. It's a short story, 4 figures. It was in Florence, the Hungarian currency. After we went through the banks and the exchange rate, it wasn't 4 figures, but it was still this book is getting the story is getting legs. And then I come home one night, and my wife says Hollywood called. And I had gotten a call from this fellow, Steve Muscarella. He was working on this show called Rescue 911 for CBS, and he wanted to shoot a version of the story as a film. And on and on, and so this really gave me the impetus to continue to write. And so, since I've been writing since the 80s, and since I've been meeting with a fair amount of success, I arrive here today feeling like I really know what I'm doing. I
As you
really
should.
know how to write. And I don't say that, I hope that doesn't sound arrogant or self-serving, but it's just that I know what to do and I like it and I'm having fun. And because I'm enjoying it, I don't really need the constant acclamation. The acclamation that I get is just practicing the craft, trying to do it as best as I can, and having a good sense of what it needs to do and where it needs to go to be right. And So I'm really having a lot of fun these days. And by the way, that story was called Echoes. That story that taught me that if you write something and it works, it will begin to take on a life of its own. That story just came out again in Weird Fiction Review number 13 from Centipede Press. And people can check it out at centipedepress.com. Great stuff.
Well, and I think that's one of the things that, I've taught basically a small publishing class because, and I taught it at a public library because the fact of the matter is, there was a guy in this actual class that told me he paid somebody $800 to get himself published. And it was like, you don't have to do that, sir. And so I explained it was basic. It's not telling you how to go get traditionally published. It was basically showing how a writer can actually turn their physical book or their physical manuscript into a book, even if it's just for them, and some of the tools they could use. And he was just like, I can't believe I paid somebody that much money to do that. Now, my whole point is now we have that ability where you had, I mean, it speaks a lot of who you are for the sheer fact that you had these people buy your stuff and purchase it and you turned into a career where now, back to technology, we have the ability to be a writer, to self-publish. Now, does that mean they're all self-published books are great? No. But the one thing I was get why I brought up the class is when I talk to people about writing, you have to be passionate about it. You have to love what you're doing. And the moment you decided that it's a job, you're going to lose some of that passion. You're going to lose some of that interest. And that's where the problem lies. As long for you, it's still something you're passionate about. It's still something you love. And you don't look at it necessarily as a quote unquote job. It's something you do that you are proud of, that you aspire to. And there's so many writers that are thinking, and this is why I brought the class up. There's so many writers that think, okay, I'm going to write a book and it's going to be a bestseller and I'm going to do all of this and it's going to be wonderful. It may be, but you have to write for you. You
That's right.
have to tell the story you want to tell. If you're telling someone else a story, then it's not really you and it's just like acting. You have to believe in that moment when you are sitting down in front of your computer or at the typewriter or with a pen in your hand. You have to believe in that moment to create
That's
it.
right. It's all about attitude. If you don't feel well and you don't feel good about what you're writing, it's just not going to work.
Mm-mm.
There has to be that enthusiasm. And I just think that rushing to publish is not something that a writer needs to do because the writer is already a writer. When you're writing, you're a writer. That's it. Publishing is another thing, and it'll come if you get the writing right.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that I heard this story about a guy, much like you were saying. People will say, "How much did you pay to get that book published?" As if it's taken for granted, as if there's something out there in the ether that is just telling people in mass that that writing is something that you don't get paid for. Writing is something that people charge you to do, and I don't know where that comes from. I guess it comes from a variety of sources, but I think that the when I was coming up, it was very clear that you might not make a lot of money doing it, at least not at first, but that you would get paid. And the adage always used to be, and I think it still should be, that the river flows toward the writer. The money comes in, it doesn't go out. You don't pay anybody to do this work for you. You do the work, and they pay you for having done the work.
The
You ever
only
notice that? Um, you ever think about this? You've heard the advice that in order to write, you need to apply the seat of the pants to the seat of the chair, and a lot of people work by that. But I think that a writer is a writer 24/7.
Mhm.
You're sweeping out the garage, you're driving the kids to school, you're going to the doctor's office. Everything that you do is writing because when you're not writing, you're getting new information, you're turning things over in your mind. When you go back then to the keyboard and you do apply the seat of the pants to the seat of the chair, you've got something. And then after an hour or two, you get up, you go to baseball practice for your son, you take the cat to the vet, whatever. But what you did in that hour of writing is still percolating. And then when you come back and after dinner, you sit down for another hour at 8 o'clock and you've got something to work with. And so I've always believed that a writer, first and foremost, is a writer, whether the writer is published or not, and that the writer is writing constantly because it's not just a craft, it's a way of life. What do you think? You think that makes sense?
Oh, it totally makes sense because I can tell you right now, before I logged on to talk to you, I was working on a part of my story. And after I moved over to log into here, I wrote down a note so I would remember that. And yes, there's many a times when, and I have a friend who's a writer. My best friend's a writer as well. And she'll be like, yep, such and such came to me today while I'm sitting there trying to do something and they gave me dialogue. And that's the thing, as a writer, your mind is constantly going. And I've talked about that too to some people, is the fact of it changes how you watch television. It changes how you watch movies because a lot of the times, like a murder mystery is no longer a murder mystery because you figured it out way in the beginning of the movie. My late husband used to could not understand how I did it. He was just like, "How did you figure that out?" I'm like, "It was easy. It was there." It's just a matter of your mind changes, I think, when you become a writer, when you truly start really working on the craft. Your mind changes and you can see things way ahead of time.
That's right. And it happens in life too, doesn't it? I mean, you'll be out somewhere and you just know what's going to happen. You know what that person's going to do next. The doctor comes in, he has a certain expression on his face. You kind of know where things are going. You can anticipate in a
Mhm.
way because we become trained observers. We know what to look for in the world, and we're always picking up things to put into our stories and turning them over in our minds and asking ourselves, what's next?
Mhm.
Where does it go from here? We ask that question in our work, and so we extend that to ask that question in our lives as well. And maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it's not because we do become hyper aware of all of the bad things that can happen, but we're also hyper aware, I hope, of all the good things that can happen. And that's what keeps me moving forward, anyhow, is that hyper awareness of if I do this, this, and this, then maybe something good is going to happen. And those good things don't happen necessarily if you don't do the groundwork to support them.
True. I do want to circle back real quick about the publishing thing is the one thing while writing, yes, writing is free and you can publish for free. There are a couple of things that you have to keep in consideration. And that is the cost of editing, the cost of your cover. There are some costs if you are self. And the reason I'm bringing this up is anybody listening here is like, well, she said I can publish for free. Yes, you can. And I made the mistake on my very first book. I wrote a rock star's journal. And the first time I released it, I really did not do a hard edit on it because it's somebody's journal. Is it really going to be edited? In real life, a journal is not edited. Yeah. So I learned a lesson. But I mean, I was going for what was there and using it as a journal, I ended up learning a lesson. So there are costs to publishing, but there are also ways to figure that out for yourself. So that's just a caveat, a side note off of our conversation, because anybody that's listening is like, well, she said it's free, and it is. You can publish your book anywhere for free. Just make sure you protect yourself and get a copyright and those things too, because those things cost too, but it's always good to cover yourself.
Yeah, there are a lot of options out there today, and certainly didn't want to give the wrong impression. I've always worked with traditional publishing, and yet, if I were an entrepreneur, which I'm not, I would certainly want to set up a spreadsheet, profit and loss, follow all these things. How much am I paying for the cover? How much am I paying for the edit? How much am I anticipating getting back from book sales? And doing the marketing, which of course these days it's not just something that the self-published writers have to do. It is something that everybody has to do, which is the reason we're doing the Minuteman newsletter. And it's the reason I have a website. And I have had a website and a blog, lawrenceconnolly.com, for the last 15 years. It's something that is just, it's expected. It's essential. And social media as well. So we do have to do our own marketing, no matter whether we're
Yeah.
doing traditional publishing or self-publishing.
And I think that's one thing that writers sometimes think, oh, well, I'll get the publishing contract and they'll market me and everything. No, that's not that way anymore. I mean, the music industry has changed, the publishing industry has changed. All of these industries have changed with the times. And now you have some responsibility in making this happen.
Yes,
Because if
and of course the marketing begins when you think of the story.
Mhm.
When you've put that first line of the story on the page or on the screen, that's when the marketing really needs to start. I mean, you need to anticipate what you're going to be doing as you're getting the word out about your book. The book needs to be focused enough and it needs to be targeted enough that you have some kind of tagline, some kind of 100-word synopsis, something in mind for getting that story to hook the reader before the reader picks up the book, so that the reader will pick up the book. You can't write something. I mean, you can write something that's very free form, that's very stream of consciousness, that meanders, and that isn't necessarily about one thing. And of course, that book might be magnificent, and many magnificent books have been written that have been that way. But in this day and age, a writer beginning, particularly a genre writer, really does need to be thinking of marketing from the very first day that
Yeah.
the idea of the book begins to coalesce. And I had a writer ask me about that after his book was out. He said, "What do you do about marketing?" And I said, "Well, you don't think about it now. I mean, you can think about it now, but when you really need to think about it is at the very beginning."
And a lot of people don't. And that was something I brought up in that class is you have to start marketing and you have to have your pen name and everything else before you actually start writing, just so you have a game plan. Um, but I want to step away from writing for a second because you said you're a musician and I did see that on your website. So do you still play or is it just something? I know you were a guitarist and a vocalist. So do you still play? I know that you did something for the music for one of your projects. I did see that. So do you still do music?
I still do music, yes, and the one of the trailers that we did for the Minutemen, one of the Minutemen trailers features some music that I wrote and performed, some guitar music, and it's a pretty good theme. As a matter of fact, I think we're going to use it for all the videos that we put on the Substack newsletter.
Nice.
So I still do perform. I was performing a lot live before COVID, and I have begun getting back to that a little bit. But primarily, the stuff that I've done that people can find is at bandcamp.com, and it's with the band that I was with for many years called the Lockery Connolly Band, Lockery, Laughry. And Christopher Lockery, he and I met in college, began playing together, and we did the coffee house circuit together. Traveled all around the East Coast, doing coffee houses and doing small venues. We played with people like Sealson Crofts and Jonathan Edwards, and we opened for the James Gang, and we had a great bit of fun. And after about 5 or 6 years, it kind of died out. We went our separate ways. And then we got back together again and resurrected all the old songs, did some new ones, and did 2 CDs. And those CDs are now a compilation at Bandcamp called The Best of Lockery Connolly. And people can find it. They can listen for free at, I guess it's Lockery Connolly, bandcamp.com or something like that. I should know that. Oh, hey, I'll tell you what. Go to lawrenceconnolly.com/music, and there it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, there it is. Also, I had a book come out in 2008, and it was called Veins. And the word veins, which sounds very visceral, actually refers to veins of rock, veins of coal. But the double meaning is certainly encouraged because it is a horror novel in many respects. And the publisher funded a CD of music based on the book. And there is a CD out there called Veins, the Soundtrack. and people can find it on Spotify. I believe it's also on Apple Music, and it's also the easiest place to find it. Lawrence C. Connolly slash is lawrenceconnolly.com/music. Yeah.
And we'll have a link on the webs on the show notes for your website. So as far as genre, which do you prefer, sci-fi or horror?
I do like science fiction. That was what I got into at first. I think my life changed when I went to see, this might be a false memory. People listening might be able to tell me if I really am remembering this or if it's something I've made up. But I went to see 2001: A Space Odyssey when it opened.
Okay.
Now, I swear that during the credit sequence, when the moon is rising over the earth or the earth is rising over the moon, and then the sun rises and there's this big sun flare, and it reads 2001: A Space Odyssey, stretching all the way across the screen, a huge cinerama screen. And then that goes out, and because it's a Kubrick movie, everything is timed to the music. And then, bam, Stanley Kubrick's name shows up on the screen. And then, bam, Arthur C. Clarke, the science fiction writer who wrote or co-wrote with Kubrick 2001. Now, this is what I remember. If you watch 2001 today, you're not going to see Arthur C. Clarke's name in the opening credits. But I have this distinct memory of sitting there in the theater as a young kid and watching the writer's name show up in letters that are a block long across the Cinerama screen. And I thought, yeah, that's it. That's what writers do. And that's what I'm going to do. And it's why instead of being Lawrence Connolly, I'm Lawrence C. Connolly as an homage to Arthur C. Clarke.
Okay.
So after that, I went out and I began reading Arthur C. Clarke, tried to read everything he had written, and just blew me away, particularly Childhood's End, which I still think is the perfect science fiction novel. It's a little dated today, but that's okay. It's dated in ways that are really cool, and it also anticipates a lot of things that we are talking about today, but it's a terrific book. And so your first love never really goes away. So I would say that, yeah, my first love is science fiction. Now, what happened, how I began to migrate from science fiction to horror is in the 70s, my sister-in-law mentions we're in New York and she and my brother are living in New York. And she says, have you heard this guy named Stephen King? And I said, no. She said, oh, he's twisted. So I figured I had to give it a look. And he wasn't, I mean, he is twisted maybe, but the stuff was good. It was really, really captivating. And so I thought, I can do this. I don't know maybe enough science. I don't know as much science as Arthur C. Clarke, but I know what's scary. And so after writing a few stories, actually 4 stories for Amazing Stories, the science fiction magazine, I wrote a couple of horror stories and sold them to Twilight Zone magazine. And the big difference was that with the horror stories, I didn't have to do any research because I knew enough scary stuff to carry the story. And things grew from there. After that, it seemed as if most of the stuff that I was writing that was selling was horror. And so I wrote horror. And although I tended to consider it more like just weird stuff. And I wrote some things for the Borderlands series, and Tom Monteleone edited that. And those were very strange, not quite horror, certainly not quite science fiction stories. And I really think that was where my stuff for a long time fell, in that just plain weird niche. Kind of like This Way to Egress, if people want to check out Nightmare Cinema. That story, I think, pretty much typified what I'd been working on for quite a long time. And then recently, um, particularly in 2018 when my brother pitched this Minuteman idea. I thought maybe it's time to really get back into science fiction in a big way. And there's no doubt about it. Minuteman is a science fiction adventure, and elements of Robin Cook and Michael Crichton in it. But certainly the thing, I don't want to give it away because there's a lot of twists and turns in it, but it does deal in part with the breakdown between the physical world and the digital world, the boundary between those two, and how permeable it really is that we were talking about earlier. As these characters, these wounded warriors who get a second chance in life, begin to realize that they may not be recognized as heroes in the real world, but they have, quite apart from any effort or anything they've tried to make happen, they are beginning to become heroes in the cyber world, with people who have appropriated their image and are, packaging it in video game form. I don't want to give anything away, but
No,
it's,
but
it's,
I
it's
mean, it makes
kind of like
sense.
that.
Yeah. Well, I was
So
gonna.
it's very much a science fiction story and very much a science fiction story of our time. And indeed, these characters who are the commandos in the story, they are from very different parts of the world. They're not they are they're from different branches of the service. They're from different walks of life. They are all people who have been in the middle of the worst stuff that can happen in the world. They are people who are war casualties. They are people who are, before their treatment, they are people who are completely in the margins. They've been completely marginalized in life. They're given a second chance to come back, but they realize that they still have a liability. They still have wounds that won't heal. And as a result, they have to rely on each other as they begin to get together and work together to try to make a difference. They realize they have to work together because when one is unable to continue, the other must take over and carry on with the mission. And the name, the title, Minutemen, refers to this one thing that happened to them when they were being treated. And that is that a side effect of the treatment means that if they exert themselves, they will be incapacitated in approximately a minute.
Okay.
And so they will then be vulnerable, completely vulnerable, and they must rely on the other people in the team to not only carry on with the mission, but to get them out of Dodge. And so kryptonite, or going it alone, is their kryptonite. Teamwork is the only solution. And I like to think that people are at their best when they are relying on one another and they are realizing that they can't go it alone, but that they have to take their specialty and make the best of it, and then rely on other people with different specialties to carry them through.
Makes sense. Makes total sense. And we do work better as a team and in a unit. Is there anything that we have not discussed that you would like to add?
Well, this has been a great amount of fun. I'm so much, so glad you invited me to sit down and chat with you for an hour. Is there anything else? I will say that there's a very cool book out there, and I think it's still available from Gauntlet Press. We talked a moment ago about horror, and it is edited by a good friend of mine, Sandra Bassarel, and she's a Mexican writer. She's basically the Mexican Stephen King. She is the biggest horror writer in Mexico, and and I had the opportunity again to work with her on a film, and we put out a book together with it was Sandra and Mick Garris, the producer director Mick Garris of Masters of Horror, and Richard Christian Matheson, the son of Richard Matheson. And we have a book out called Nightmares.
Okay.
And it has a terrific cover by David Slade. And if people are interested in getting a dose of my horror, and while they're waiting for a dose of my science fiction with Minutemen Execute and Run, they can check this out from Gauntlet Press. I think they'll really enjoy it.
Okay.
So, other than that, I'm sure that there are things I will think about after we log off, but that's the thing that comes to mind. And Donna, thanks so much. This has been a riot. This has been a blast.
Thank you for coming on.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I'm glad that Lawrence and I broached the whole publishing industry. And yes, he's been traditionally published for most of his career. And for the person that's trying to write, I hope you got, if you want to be an author and you want to publish, I hope you got some information from this because it is a daunting prospect. And yeah, that's something that I taught in that little class is that you have to start thinking of all the marketing stuff before your book comes out. And yeah, I admit I didn't do that. I did not do that because I didn't really have anybody to sit there and tell me, hey, it's okay. You can do it this way. I didn't have that. I had a friend who was traditionally published, and my biggest reason for publishing when I did was because I had a signing at Barnes and Noble. And as a new author, that was just like, okay, here we are. Um, but I think it's important that if you're trying to get yourself out there, look at different avenues. Look at, like he did, look at getting published in a magazine. But now we have Substack, and you can go ahead and publish things there and build an audience there with what you're doing. One of the other authors that had been on here, I think Everett was his last name. It was a while ago since he was on the show, but he has basically a Substack that you can go in now. He's doing a serial novel, so you can follow him there. So I think it's important that if you're thinking about being a writer, trying to get stuff out there that creates this thing for readers to go back to and look at. And for me, I've kind of stepped away a bit for I'm rewriting my novels except for one of them. That one most likely will stay pretty much the same. But the rest of them I've pulled. And because I did rush them and I wasn't happy with them. So I've pulled them and I'm working on redoing them and revising them, and that's okay. As far as Lawrence, I would definitely check his book out. He seems to have very much if you're into sci-fi and if you're into horror, there's avenues for you to look. He's got books that are not only called Veins, but Vipers and Vortex. So it's a whole world that he's created. So you might want to go and experience that. And you can always watch the movie and see what his little short story did. So on that note, I hope you guys are doing well, and I thank you for tuning in. And no matter when you're listening, well, firstly, I do have to thank Fast Susie for the intro and outro music. But I thank you guys for tuning in, and I appreciate it. Whenever you're listening, morning, noon, or night, I really do appreciate it. And, well, I'll catch you next time, guys. Bye.